All right, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone who's on, and we'll have some more folks signing on here as we go through it. Similar to the last session, as we go through this, if you have any questions, I'll do my best to address them kind of live as we go. If you just want to throw them in the chat, I try to monitor that as we go. But again, I appreciate everybody's hopping on for our second session here with great teammate and true lacrosse. Talking about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And what we're going to get into today, a lot about what drives us and some things that we can focus on to give ourselves the best opportunity at success and the most sustainable way to go about it. This session should probably be about 25 or 30 minutes. And again, as you have any questions, please go ahead and pop them in the chat and I'll do my best to get to them. I'll also have my email at the end. I'm happy to follow up with anybody individually that has some follow-up questions to any presentation. So as we talk about this entire series here this spring and into the summer, what we're really working on is this idea of maximizing our potential and optimizing our reality. So what we're doing with that is, we want to take this idea of looking at where we are and where we want to go and how do we maximize our potential and how do we put ourselves on the best path forward to reach that potential. This is accomplished through the foundational elements of positive psychology, which we use throughout these presentations, and this idea of building habits and a community culture and the team around us that helps foster an environment for flourishment, which is a word that we use in the positive psychology space. But I think what's really important here is this idea of forming habits, both physical, active habits, as well as mental habits that are repeatable, that we can practice, that we can always improve upon and be aware of. And then the importance of the community that's around us, that's always in support of us. So that parents, coaches, teachers, friends, teammates, all of those folks play an important part in helping us reach our potential. And we want to make sure that we're very intentional and mindful of the folks that we keep close around us on our team, so to speak. When you talk about the elements of positive psychology, we'll pull this slide up every time we do one of these presentations. Last week, we talked about gratitude. So we were under that positive emotion there at the beginning. This week, when we talk about motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic, we're going to be talking about meaning and achievement. These are the 5 plus 1, the 6 when you add vitality, but these are the core elements of well-being and kind of the foundational pieces of positive psychology. This idea of creating an environment that allows us to experience positive emotions, that allows us to build engagement with what we're doing and who we're doing it with. It's important to have those deep, meaningful relationships. And then when we talk about meaning, we want to have purpose in what we're doing. We want to have a great why for showing up. We want to celebrate achievement. A lot of times we get confused with this idea of positive psychology that winning doesn't matter. And we'll talk about that tonight on this talk. So we do want to celebrate achievement, but we also want to make sure that we're framing achievement in the right way. And the vitality piece, which has been kind of a newer piece and fundamental piece in the positive psych space, is really about our habits of our own physical well-being. So sleep, nutrition, hydration, all of those elements, and how those factor into our ability to maximize these five pieces. So for tonight, when we talk about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, we're going to really be talking about the meaning and achievement part of this. So motivation, what is it? We talk all the time about motivational quotes. We have, coaches that, some are great at motivating, some aren't. We kind of have a vision of what it means to be motivated. But when you really strip it down, what we're talking about is what gives us purpose or direction to what we're doing and how we operate. The important part of this really that we'll be getting into this evening, all right, is this idea that you see there highlighted in green, this idea of personal, social, or secondary motives such as affiliation, so the groups we're associated with, competition, obviously as lacrosse players and athletes, that's a big piece of it, and individual interests and goals. So what's important to us as an individual what we're interested in and passionate about, what our goals are, again, as we talk about what we want to achieve, all right, and how that plays into the larger group and team setting. And obviously we're going to talk about this important distinction between internal motivating forces and external factors. So we talk about what drives us as a person, and then also this idea of the external factors, awards, winning, losing, it uses the word punishment, but accountability, things like that, and how all of those things work together when it comes to motivating us as athletes, and the role that we can all play in making sure that we're motivated in the right way for the right reasons. So the first thing, if you have a pen and paper with you, I just want you to start jotting down some notes. All right. When you think of the word motivation, what comes to mind? It could be a person, it could be a quote, it could be a poster that you have in the locker room at your school. When you think of being motivated, what is the first thing that comes to mind? What motivates you? What motivates you as a student? What motivates you as a lacrosse player? And what motivates you as a person? What motivates you to get up in the morning? And trust me, for all of us, sometimes the answer is nothing, and we have really hard mornings to get up. But when you think about being motivated, when you think about being excited to do something, what is it that excites you? What is it that drives you as a student when you go to school? What is it that drives you as a lacrosse player when you go to practice? What is it that drives you as a person to just be the best person you can be? So take a minute to jot down a note or two about each one of those, what motivates you. And then after you jot down those items, I want you to jot down right next to, for each one of those, I want you to jot down why that motivates you. Give you 90 seconds, 2 minutes. We talked about this last session if you were on. 2 minutes turns into 90 seconds really fast in my world, so I apologize in advance. But take the next minute or two to reflect on these quick questions, because they're going to be important as we move forward. I'll give you another 30 seconds or so. Again, what motivates you? What gets you going? What is it that makes you excited to compete as a lacrosse player? What makes you excited to try to get good grades or be a successful student? And then what motivates you to be a good person, and why is that? Okay, so as you look at what you wrote down, what we talk about when we talk about motivation really can be boiled down to two things. What are the things that motivate us inside and outside? So what do we mean by inside and outside? Well, when we're talking about intrinsic motivation, what we're really talking about is motivation that comes from within. So quite literally inside of us. It isn't anything external. It isn't anything in the outside world. It's really what is inside us, in our brain, in our heart, in our soul. It's what drives us. It's what drives us to be the best that we can be. And it's really easy to say that, that is the most important thing, or that is the only thing that matters. And what we'll talk about a little bit tonight is that it is really, really important for the inside part. But we'll also talk about the role that the outside part plays. Okay, so what do we mean when we talk about the inside and outside? So when you look at this quick image, it's pretty simple. And this concept isn't over the top complicated, similar to a lot of the stuff that we talk about. But what's really important is that we understand the impact that both can have, positive and negative, on our pursuit of being the best version of ourselves in whatever capacity that we're in. So when we talk about intrinsic motivation, we're talking about things like purpose and interest and the pursuit of mastery, this idea of being the very best we can be at something. Curiosity is a huge part of this. And we're going to talk about this idea of curiosity because it's one thing that as I've worked with student athletes in from everywhere from the youth level to the college level, curiosity and this idea of, pursuing something for the sake of pursuing it and just seeing how good we can be is being lost. And one of the reasons that it's being lost is we're developing an overwhelming fear of failure. And that is across the board. It's with coaches, it's with players, and it's driven by the idea that we are taking a win at all cost approach. And so when we talk about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, the winning part is the extrinsic part. And this is where the balance comes in. So when we talk about extrinsic, you can see things like our grade, things like points scored or money earned, our career, our exams, and how well we do on them. These are all extrinsic motivators. So it's this idea of I show up and work really hard so that I can score a lot of points. I go to school and work really hard so that I can get good grades. If the grades are the motivator, that's an extrinsic motivator. If I show up to school and I work really hard because I have a genuine interest in the subject matter and I'm curious about learning more, that is an intrinsic motivator. The argument will be made that the intrinsic motivation is what allows us to actually pursue the extrinsic success. And what we often miss is that part. So when we talk about this concept of, and you hear it used in sports all the time, of trust the process. A lot of times the process is more intrinsically motivated. And this idea is you're trusting that process to yield the extrinsic results that you desire, be it good grades, wins, goals, assists, success. The extrinsic success comes from a commitment and intentionality to the intrinsic motivation. So when a lot of times when we talk about this subject, folks will feel like, well, if I'm only, if I'm not focused on winning, if I'm not focused on scoring points, if I'm not focused on getting great grades, then I'm not really trying to do the thing that matters. In reality, if you're focused on the process, if you're focused on your interest and your curiosity and your purpose, what that's going to do is that is actually going to drive you to practice more, to study more, to engage more. And by doing that, you are naturally going to find yourself advancing from a developmental standpoint to find yourself getting better grades, scoring more points, having more success. So when we take the focus and we shift it internal and we really focus on our why do we love doing what we do? Why do we love showing up to practice? What is it at school that really engages me as a student? When we start to find that, and we start to find the passion in pursuing mastery, we start to find the passion in following that purpose, that deeper meaning than just trying to get through the practice or just trying to get through class. When we find that deeper interest, it raises our curiosity, it raises our willingness to take risk. And what that does is it naturally raises our ability to grow as a person, as a player, as a student. That's the fundamental difference between these two motivations. So as you can see, they go together, but one helps yield greater results than the other. So why does intrinsic matter more? Okay, so as we talked about, when we have that internal motivation, okay, when we're motivated as a person, to just become the best we can be, we are naturally going to be more engaged. So what do we mean by more engaged? Well, that means that if I show up to practice and I am intrinsically motivated, I have that curiosity level, I have a desire to master my craft, I have a desire to pursue my potential. I don't have a desire to be the starter. I don't have a desire to win games. That's not my goal. What my goal is to pursue that mastery, is to be fully invested in what I'm doing. When I'm more engaged, I am going to naturally be more focused on what I'm doing. I'm going to be far more likely to take risks in order to learn and grow. So that's where we shift down to that less fear of failure. The number of athletes that I've worked with one-on-one that talk about, well, I don't try that because I'm not very good at it. The reason that we don't try something that we're not good at is because we're afraid of the outcome. That's because we're afraid of the external factors, be it this mistake is going to cost me playing time. This mistake could mean that I look bad in front of my friends, as opposed to intrinsic motivation allows us to look at it as this is an opportunity for me to try something new in my pursuit of improvement, because I'm motivated by my passion to simply become the best person, player, student that I can become. All of that is housed within our own mind, within our own heart, within our own feet, all of those things. So we have less fear of failure when we have that intrinsic motivation. When we're only motivated by the outcome, when we're only motivated, and the word only is important, when we're only motivated by the trophy or the awards or the social media post or whatever it might be, then our driver, all right, is going to keep us from taking risk. Because as soon as we take risk, and we talked about this in the previous session, we are wired as humans to find safety. We are wired as humans to step away from a situation that we feel uncomfortable in. So we have to actively pursue being comfortable with this idea of failure, with this idea of taking a growth mindset to a practice, to a classroom, to anything that we're doing. Honestly, we have to get comfortable with this idea of, in order to grow and improve, along the way, I'm going to fail. And if failure is something that terrifies us, it's because we're looking outward for motivation and acceptance as an affirmation, as opposed to looking inward with this idea of, I understand that this is part of the process. So when we're intrinsically motivated, we're more engaged, we have less fear of failure, and ultimately we have greater resiliency and growth potential. So when I talk to coaches, when I talk to players, the number one thing I talk about is this idea of, are you afraid to fail? Because if the answer is yes, and it's really hard to get someone to admit it, but if the answer is yes, then we've got to reframe what it is that's driving us forward. Because if it truly is things like purpose, we go back to this, things of interest and mastery and curiosity. If it truly is those things that are motivating us, then we're not afraid of failing. Because our purpose or our interest or our pursuit of mastery, curiosity, that is a far greater element than any single failure could be. And so we really want to push ourselves through that fear of failure by being motivated by our own personal growth and trying to reach our potential than anything else. And the resiliency piece that comes out of it is wildly important, because the number of athletes that you can watch in competition that react negatively to a negative situation, and one that reacts in a next play mentality with that resiliency we're talking about, This is what separates a lot of good players from great players. It's what separates good students from great students. And as we get older in life, it is one of the defining qualities of successful people and folks who don't reach their maximum potential. And so often, and it seems so counterintuitive, that if all we are chasing is the external shiny things, then we are missing the key piece of that internal motivation. And any coach would tell you that he wants players that are more engaged, that don't have a fear of failure, that are resilient, that have growth potential and a growth mindset. Every coach would tell you that. But what it comes down to is, are we creating an environment that fosters and builds and encourages that type of development within student athletes? And then when it is, are those student athletes being intentional about thinking through how each one of these things plays out every day they're at practice? Are they walking on the field with this idea of, I'm going to be engaged, I'm not going to feel failure, and I'm going to be resilient today? Those three things are such big elements of growing into a successful student athlete. So when I talk about this all the time, the number one thing I get asked, well, what about winning and what about trophies? Doesn't winning matter? Of course it matters. I'm a college head coach. If I sat here and told you that winning doesn't matter, I would just be lying to everybody. Winning matters a great deal. Losing stinks. But what I will tell you is it's more of why winning matters. It's more of what is driving us to pursue the trophy or the award, not just the trophy or the award. That's the distinction that so often we miss. And so when we're looking at it, I love this image I came across during my graduate work, talking about this idea of, why do we encourage intrinsic motivation? Well, it naturally increases creativity. And I want you to think through these things through the lens of a lacrosse player. Just that. Increased creativity. Huge for lacrosse players. Enhanced resiliency. Yep. Greater self-determination. Of course. Positive relationships on a team or in a workplace. We would all love that on every team we've been on. More satisfaction and fulfillment in what we're doing. That'd be incredible. Improved mental health and well-being. No brainer. Continuous learning opportunities. That idea of curiosity. Man, the more curious we can be, the more we are just going to continue to develop into a better and better player. And then the last piece is sustainable effort. The sustainable effort comes from that idea of resiliency and making the next play. So again, elements of a winning team and successful players all come from the benefits of intrinsic motivation. Creativity, that's the idea of taking risks, being okay with failure. You're at practice, there's an opportunity to take a shot behind your back. You don't want to do it because you're afraid that it's going to have this negative effect on something else. No. All right. If your motivation is development and curiosity, and you have a passion for becoming a better player, take the behind the back shot, even if it doesn't work. And when your coach, if he gets upset with you, explain to your coach, this is the place where I learn how to be creative as a player. That's what the practice field is. That's what the backyard is. I will be the first person to argue that over the years, as we have gotten away from, pickup games, in quotes, and this idea of giving kids the autonomy to pick teams and lay out a field and figure out how to make it work, pick sticks and play 3-on-3 or 4-on-4, whatever it might be. We've lost the creativity. We've become too organized sometimes. And what we want to have is we want to give that space for that creativity, because what's going to happen is when we're creative, we're going to fail. Well, if we are creative and we fail, we're going to learn how to be resilient. We're going to learn how to be self-determined. Okay. If I do those things and my teammates understand that and they have my back and they're supportive, we're going to create that positive team environment. And then if I have that positive team environment, I'm going to show up or I'm going to leave with greater satisfaction and fulfillment of being a part of that team, which is naturally, every piece of science will tell you is going to improve your overall mental health and well-being. All right. And if I have that, I'm going to be motivated to want to continue to get better, to want to continue to learn, right? And all of those things lead us to that sustainable effort. Just being able to show up over and over again because we've developed that purpose and passion. That's how this cycle works. And those are the elements of a winning team. Those are the elements of a successful player. Everybody would kill to be a part of that group. And all of this stems from the idea of being motivated intrinsically. And by the way, all of those things will yield wins. They'll yield rewards. They'll yield all the external successes that we talked about earlier. But it doesn't work the other way. The homework assignment. I know everybody loves getting these on a Sunday evening. I want you to take these 4 questions, jot these down on your paper, and just spend some time this week thinking about them. Talk to your parents about them. Talk to your coaches about them if you have a chance. Why do I show up at practice? What's my why? What drives me to try hard? That sounds so silly, but what truly drives you to try hard? Who is the person that gets me excited to be my best? And why are they that person? And then maybe the most important thing, and this was an exercise I did with my college team just a few weeks ago. What would help you be better? So often we spend so much time worried about so many things that very rarely do we take a minute to sit back and say, wait a second, what is it that I don't have? Or what is it that I need to be better? And then talk to the people that can make that happen. You know, we're so often afraid to ask for that help, to ask for that support. But again, if we are intrinsically motivated, if we have a great purpose and a great curiosity and a passion for becoming better, that isn't driven by just one single win or one single award, but instead it's just driven by that desire to see just how good we can be. If that truly is how we're going to be driven, then of course, let's talk about what's going to help you get there. That's the biggest piece, you know? And so with my college team, I sent out a Google form and I said, I want each one of you to provide the number one thing that I, as a coach, could do better to motivate or inspire you. And here's why I did it. As a coach, as a parent, we assume that we know the answer to that question because that's just who we are. You know, as a coach, I assume that I know my players well enough to know this answer. But what I don't know is I don't know all the other factors going on all the time. As a parent, it's the same thing. I feel like I have a great feel for what motivates my 3 daughters. But I also have to be humble enough to just simply ask, how can I support you better? And what I also want them to grow up learning is if they need something to help them perform better, they should ask. They should make someone aware. So your homework assignment this week, reflect on, why do I show up at practice? What drives me to try hard? Who is the person that gets me excited to be my best, and why are they that person? What are the things they do? And then what would help me be better? What is something that, you know, is missing? What is something someone could do for you? Whatever that might be to help push this motivation forward. So I want you to focus on that this week. So when you start to kind of wrap all of these pieces together and you start to connect intrinsic and extrinsic, there's a psychology theory called self-determination theory of motivation. This is some really nerdy stuff, and this is the best way to kind of simplify it, but the things that matter a lot. The 3 things that really are important to an athlete in order to maximize motivation and engagement are competency, autonomy, and relatedness. So what does that mean? The competency piece. I want to feel as an athlete like I understand and am effective at what I'm doing. Now, a challenge with that, and we see it all the time, especially in a sport like lacrosse, which is a very skill-based sport. I have some hockey friends that we've talked about the same thing in the hockey rink, is it's very, very easy for someone brand new to the sport of lacrosse or hockey to get very, very frustrated in their first couple practices, their first season, whatever it might be. And a lot of people think it's because they don't have the skills. Well, that is partly what it is. But from a psychology standpoint, they lose their motivation and engagement because they just don't feel like they're competent enough to be a part of the group. Autonomy. Players want to feel like they're involved in the choices that are being made and they have the opportunity to be themselves. They don't want to feel like they're being told, for lack of a better way of putting it, that they have to play a character as a player. A great example of this is when we think about leadership. A lot of times, we think about, the Michael Jordans of the world. We think about Derek Jeter, Tom Brady. We have this vision of what a leader is supposed to look like. One thing that we miss is there are so many leaders that are not encouraged to lead because they don't look like that role. They might not be loud. They might not be great in a huddle. They might not be the rah-rah guy. But if they're genuinely themselves and they have that passion for making everybody better and for pursuing their own growth, they have the ability to be their authentic self and lead that way. So autonomy is a huge piece of the motivation and engagement part of this. And the last piece is relatedness, which is so, so important in sports. And this is where when you talk about folks that, play sports their whole life and then get out of sports, the number one thing that you talk to former college athletes about is they'll say, all I miss is the locker room and the bus rides. They don't talk about missing winning games. They don't talk about missing scoring points or scoring goals. They talk about missing the locker room and the bus rides, the hotel stays. That's because as humans, we need that connection. We need that sense of belonging to a group. So when you take competency, you take autonomy, and you take relatedness, and you're able to merge those three together, that's where you start to maximize motivation and engagement. And if we can maximize that motivation and engagement, so every day when I walk out on the field, whether I'm the best player or not, but I feel like I can be effective at what I'm doing, I feel like I'm a part of the process. I'm not just being told to go from cone to cone without allowing myself to grow and to be myself on the field. And I feel like I have a strong connection with those around me and a sense of belonging to the team. There is such a huge opportunity now for me to be motivated, for me to be engaged. And that's what yields the performance, the well-being, and ultimately those extrinsic successes that we all pursue, like winning. So again, the idea of being motivated internally has nothing to do with winning not mattering. It has to do with how we frame getting to winning. And too often we skip the path and we try to jump to the end. So the motivated athlete is motivated by internal factors, pursues growth and mastery over awards and recognition, feels ownership of their growth. The fourth one's my favorite one, finds joy in the competition, not in the results of competition. Finding joy in the competition, the fun is in competing. Okay, the motivated athlete builds strong bonds with teammates and wants them to succeed, wants to achieve as a result of their efforts, with a focus on the efforts. They want to feel competent and in control, and they embrace the uneven path to growth and success because the focus is on the process and not just the results. We showed this last session when we talked about gratitude and how it plays into the line of success. With motivation and this idea of intrinsic motivation, there's nothing more important in the messy line to success than that intrinsic motivation. Because what that intrinsic motivation allows us to do is that intrinsic motivation allows us to, what I'd say is, deal with the dips. So if all we care about is winning, and it's only about winning, well, what happens when you lose a game or two? How do you bounce back? If it's only about winning and you're winning games, but you have internal conflict, does the winning just mask the problems that are underneath? As athletes, if we are intrinsically motivated, the winning part is great. But what the intrinsic motivation allows us to do is it allows us to be consistent. It allows us to stay the course in successes and in failures. Because ultimately, the intrinsic motivation is trying to follow the straight line path. And it understands that while the path will not be straight, that every time it spikes or every time it dips, my purpose, my curiosity, my desire to grow as a player and person, that stays the same. And so I can show up every day with the same motivation, whether we won the night before or lost the night before. And what that allows us through consistency is it allows us to develop quality over time. The way I like to phrase it is it allows us to stack good day after good day, and the compound interest of that gets us closer to the success we desire faster. If we are only worried about the shiny thing at the end, well, if we don't get that shiny thing, then what? If we're focused on the process of getting to the shiny thing, then every day we wake up, and whether it's going to school or being in our community or going to the practice field or going to the choir room or the band room or anything else, when we're intrinsically motivated, it allows us every day to continue to pursue our purpose and passion. And as a result, we are going to get to the shiny thing. But we can't skip that step, because if we skip that step, we are not going to have the consistency required to maximize our potential as a player and as a person. Great quote from Pat Riley that I'll wrap up with, that I love when it comes to this. If you have a positive attitude and constantly strive to give your best effort, eventually you will overcome your immediate problems and find you are ready for greater challenges. The two highlighted pieces in green are so important. This idea of having a positive attitude and giving your best effort. Those are two things that you can control. They're intrinsically driven. The outside world does not impact those. You are in control of your attitude and effort on a daily basis. It's super cliche. It's been said a million times, but man, is it true. If there's anything you get from this talk, positive attitude, best effort. Those two things every single day. And the reason the word eventually is in pink is eventually means it's not going to happen right away. We have become a society of Amazon Prime. Success cannot be ordered on Amazon Prime. It just doesn't work that way. There is not an app for that. It is a messy process. As we showed, success is not a straight line. It is all over the place. But eventually, you will overcome your immediate problems and find you are ready for greater challenges. If you find yourself in a spot where all you're having is success, I would challenge you to step back and see if you need to put yourself in a more challenging environment. Challenge your positive attitude, challenge your best effort, put yourself in a position where failure is definitely an option, and push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Because if you are motivated internally, you will show up every day with that positive attitude. You will give your best effort. And yes, eventually, you will overcome what's the challenge in front of you now and put yourself in a position to be ready for a greater challenge ahead. I want to thank everybody for hopping on. I ran a little bit longer than I anticipated, so I apologize, but hopefully that's okay. If you want to write down real quick, the next session will be Sunday, April 6th. We'll be talking about consistency of performance and focus. This idea of, consistency is what yields quality. And I think is an important factor, especially for many of you as you are in or heading into your seasons this spring, and then, into the summer months with the club season. Again, if anybody has any follow-up questions, you can always shoot me an email at adam@gr8cm8.com or hop on my website and shoot me a note through there. But I appreciate everybody's time, and I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday evening, and best of luck for everybody that's filled out a tournament bracket. I know mine took a couple hits yesterday and today, but that's okay. I'll still enjoy watching. Everybody have a great night, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.